I'll never forget when I was, my classmate who finished with me in high school was Oprah Winfrey in the class of East Nashville High, 71. Oh, wow. And I was on her show maybe 20 years ago. She had me on the show with some of the other class superlatives. And she said, when she came on air, Andre, you've done all these great things, but you were such a nerd. What happened? I said, well, like all of us, Oprah Gail, we grow up. And here's my wife out here to testify I'm not a nerd anymore. And here's all these other articles that show that I'm a man of fashion and style. So one time years ago, I had a chance to talk when I met with her. I said, I was 3 out of 310 in the academic, in the class. I mean, I was just below the salutatorian, and you were number 10. And she says, yeah, but what's your bank account now? So.
What is up, fam? I'm Dr. Dale, the author of How to Raise a Doctor, Wisdom from Parents Who Did It, the author of Black Men in White Coats, the author of the Dr. Doc Children's Series, the author of Pre-Med Mondays, and the author of my newest book. Got to make sure y'all get a copy of it, A Doctor's Guide to Self-Publishing. People always say, Dale, how do you write so many books? Well, I'll tell you how I do it right here in this one, A Doctor's Guide to Self-Publishing. So if you've got a story to tell, get the book. We'll put the links down below. We give out a lot of free copies, so we'll put the links down below, or you can find it on Amazon once it's released. At the time of this recording, I haven't put it out yet, but it is coming. And you will listen to the Black Men in White Coats podcast, a place where Black clinicians have the platform to share their stories with listeners like you. So many great things going on in the world of Black Men in White Coats. In particular, we're starting to re-engage with a lot of partners to try to get these Black Men in White Coats youth summits up and rolling again post-COVID. So we've got a lot of new partners. We're excited about that. Stay tuned. Look in the description below to get any information on updates for Black Men in White Coats. Now, today is a very, very special treat. Very special treat. It's a gentleman, a physician. I will consider him a legend in medicine. Somebody who I've been trying to get on the podcast for a long time now, and I finally got him. Even though it's funny, we see each other every now and then at conferences and such. But he's a very busy guy, and I finally got him. Not only is he a very busy guy, you're going to learn a lot about him, but for those of you who are watching the video right now on YouTube, he is one of the best dressed physicians ever. One of the best dressed, but he is sharp. He is so sharp. And none other than Dr. André Churchwell. Dr. André Churchwell, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dale, thank you so much. This is something a long time coming, but I've been excited about the opportunity to share and chat with you, man.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to have you here. I'm somewhat giddy because people kind of within the circles of the diversity work, they understand kind of what you've done in the field of medicine and kind of what you represent and such. But for those who aren't in there, we're going to explain it today. We're going to kind of get into that. I'm not going to give too much more of your intro because I want us to kind of get into that in the actual interview process. But I was reading your bio and reading. We were just discussing. I was reading a great article on you, and you've just done so much over the course of your time. As a physician, but even before a physician, you've just done so much. And I just want to, before I even get into that, I just want to say thank you for being a role models, kind of paving the way for those of us who are coming through. And a lot of us are just trying to figure this thing out. And you've been there, done that, and kind of showed us how to do it. So from the start, I'm going to say thank you for doing all that and making it possible for people like me to kind of be going through this whole medical journey right now.
Well, man, I appreciate it. The thing that I have learned from a lot of mentors, and you and I have talked about this, and I'm sure your books speak to this importantly. How do you find great mentors? What type of mentors do you need? I wrote an article a few years ago for the Texas Heart Institute Journal called Hearing Voices. And it was an article about great mentors in my life. The editor is a buddy of mine. He's just passed away, though, Herb Fred. And he called me and said, Andre, with his Texas accent, this is not a psychiatric journal about hearing voices. I said, no, Fred, that's not what it's about. It's about when we're about ready to do a procedure, about ready to make the wrong diagnosis or the implications of something that we probably did not read the signs correctly or the data correctly. We hear in our mind some of those great coaches, our great mentors. I hear Dr. Willis Hurst, the great physician leader at Emory, who was my chair and one of my great mentors, ask me, Andre, you're going off the road, or Joe Hardison, the chair of medicine at the VA in Atlanta and Decatur, saying with his high-pitched drawl, Andre, what'd you do that for? I mean, I can hear that in my head, and I know to get back on the road. But you need all kinds of mentors. I need a physician role model that can help me when I'm seeing something I've never seen before, like the pink orangutan. At my age, I've seen a lot of stuff, but there are a couple of things I've not seen. Who can I pick up the phone and call? I call Roman DeSanctis. I think Roman just turned 90. The chair emeritus of cardiology at the Mass General Hospital was a great teacher of mine and still answers the phone on the first ring. If I'm having a problem about how to be an administrator, I would call John Stone, the late John Stone, or Dan Fetterman, who just passed away at Harvard, the dean of students. So you need all kinds. I have a life coach mentor, was my dad. He was the best life coach. And these guys all live model lives you could watch, you could learn from even decisions they made about what kind of car to buy. I mean, Dr. Hurst, you think about him, he'd tell you what kind of stethoscope to get, and he could explain that, but he'd also tell you, why did I buy this little small Mercedes? Well, let me tell you about the miles per gallon and the light beams, high beam when you're coming back on call from Decatur into Grady Hospital, how you can see clearer. I mean, just an amazing set of folks. And you have to kind of hold out for the best. They're out there. For sure.
So you mentioned your dad being the best life coach mentor. Let's take it way back there. As we get in your story, people will understand why it's so important to take it back to your parents, because it's not just you as a doctor in the family now. We'll talk about this now, but your parents did something right along this journey.
Yeah.
So what kind of man was your dad? And while you're going, I'm just going to close this so the online viewers can get a better view of me and get the shimmering going. But let's start by, what kind of man was your dad?
So Dad was a product of the greatest generation. He was born in 1917 in Clifton, Tennessee, little small town in West Tennessee. Most notable for a lot of, it was a ferry boat for the Tennessee River that a lot of the Confederate Army would use to bring their cannons and stuff. And Dad's father, Jesse Churchwell, was born there. And my grandfather was probably the first true generation out of slavery. His father, Isom, was the son of two enslaved Africans that were owned by a slave owner named John Churchwell. A lot of folks have the wrong idea. This guy's Scott-Irish. Everybody sees enslaved Africans as part of some giant taro plantation. No, if you look at the literature, most enslaved Africans were enslaved by owners who were not that wealthy, and for that matter, only would own a few slaves. Maybe 4 to 7 would be probably an average. And so praise the Lord, my great-great-great-grandparents met, who were from Africa there on John Churchwell's farm, and they married, and they created Isom Churchwell, who was my great-great-grandfather. Dad comes from Clifton. He lands in Nashville. My grandfather loaded everybody up on a proverbial mule cart and drove his 4 kids and my grandmother, Johnny Churchwell, in Nashville in the 20s. And Dad, being influenced by his mom more than his father. His mother was a woman of culture, who actually went to a preparatory school, if you can imagine that, at the time in the 1920s. And she had a piano in the house and really inculcated in Dad and his siblings the importance of learning, reading, music, all that. And Dad just gulped it up. And so he became just really enamored with music of all kinds and became this extreme bibliophile. He clearly began to appreciate that the world could be viewed through the portal of a book. You might be stuck in racist North Nashville in 1928 at 10 years of age, but if you're 11 years, but if you've got a book that transports you to India in the writings of Gandhi or whatever it might be, that offers you a window out of that cramped, racist, confining world. And so as he finished Pearl High and then went to the Army and came back on the GI Bill to Fisk, he landed at Fisk at the time that all the great Harlem Renaissance leaders were leading Fisk. Charles Johnson was the president. Aaron Douglas, who was the poet, one of the artist laureates of the Harlem Renaissance. One of the great poet laureates of Harlem Renaissance was the English professor and librarian Arna Bontemps. And they poured all this stuff in this mind of my dad. And he just
I'm curious, was your dad intimately engaged with those individuals, or was
he
it
was?
More like
he was. As a matter of fact, as we grew up, and he became a reporter, the first African-American reporter on a paper in the southeast part of the country, this Nashville Banner, an evening paper. He went every year. He covered the Fisk graduation, and would take my little knucklehead brothers and myself to the graduation to meet Arnold Von Thompson, to meet Aaron Douglas, and to be taken to the Carl Van Vetchen Art Gallery, and to listen to Von Thompson read poetry at graduation that he had written. So he was the brilliance of my father was he understood that if he showed you that if he loved you enough, and you got that part, then you would understand that any message he was bringing to you in a way to inculcate special messages in your head would have some value. So the love opened the doors of perception, as Aldous Huxley would say, and it let us kind of take in these lessons of listening to Don Giovanni on Saturday mornings, or listening to Louis Armstrong, or listening to Marian Anderson, or listening to Richard Tucker, the New York tenor for the Metropolitan Opera. And you do that cleaning the house on Saturday morning on your knees, waxing floors, and he'd be blasting his RCA record player throughout the house. He'd play the original Showboat album with Paul Robeson. But more importantly, as you're doing this stuff, he would talk to you about it. And he made it interesting. And he made it because it was coming from love. Messages were taken and received. And so he had a library in this little 2,000 square foot home. It was the biggest room in the whole house, the only room with an air conditioner in the wall. And in the summers, he was brilliant. He said, you either go outside and cut all these yards, Andre, to help pay your tuition, or I'll give you the same amount of money if you read this stack of books and write me a report. Well, that was an easy no-brainer. Air conditioning in his room versus 99 degrees heat in Nashville, Tennessee in the summer with 100% humidity, that was a no-brainer. So start reading Langston Hughes, start reading Ernest Hemingway's Farewell to Arms, From Whom the Bell Tolls, reading Aldous Huxley, Thomas Huxley, all the great authors he had in this cramped little library. And it became something that we all felt was useful and enriching. And we began to understand how he viewed it, transported you out of that small world we were in. And my brothers picked this up from me. But along the way, we got interested in science and math. I love the humanities, but science and math was a great calling. And so I went into engineering school at Vanderbilt before I went to med school.
So thinking back to this, I'm going to rewind a little bit. So you know your family history very well. Sounds like, you track it back to slavery.
We did. We actually did this. My dad passed away in 2009, and he was born September 9th, 1917. So in September 9th, 2017, we held at Vanderbilt a centennial celebration of his history. And every one of the children had to take decades of his life and do research. So my daughter and I got this straw to go back to Clifton and film the family cemetery, film the church that Isom Churchwell built with his hands. We didn't know any of this stuff. Went back to the town. We didn't know. We learned all ad hoc as we did this. Went to the city seat there in Wayne County and pulled out documents that talked about Isom Churchwell and his role in the city. Yeah.
Okay. So I had it wrong. I was gonna ask if knowing your family history, if you felt as though that helped you succeed in life, kind of knowing where you're from.
It was really dad and mom. And mom's from Bell Buckle, Tennessee. He met her as he came back to fish. She was a freshman at TSU, and she was a woman of grit too. So she's raised by a woman, Viola Buckingham, 4 children. No husband, dies of a hypertensive bleed. I think a health disparity. Dale was in his early 20s, and blood pressure was sky high apparently. Died on the farm farming. And my grandmother then raises the kids, teaches them how to shoot guns, fish, hike, take care of animals, and sends her daughter to Nashville to go to high school. There's only high school in the area is at Pearl. And this is in probably 1947 or something. Mama hitchhikes with a bag all the way to Nashville to a boarding home that my grandmother knew the lady that owned the boarding home. So she's 16 years of age and makes her way on her own about 30 miles outside of Nashville. So once again, we're standing on the shoulders, as Newton would say, of giants. And because we're standing on their shoulders, we can see further, do more. But the message that comes out of all this is the inculcation of reaching down and bringing people up from your journey. You're not that special, but you are special enough to help the next person, the next student, the next resident, the next college student. And so those were deeply felt and inculcated.
So what type of Beyond the reading, what type of child were you? Were you into sports? Were you active? Well, we might as well get into your younger brothers as well.
Yeah, so
were you
I
guys
spent a lot of
fight?
time with my young brother. I was a fair, I mean, I think all of us, to a large extent, if we're willing to admit it, are all converted introverts. I think, as you probably were, you were very bookish. I was bookish. I played street ball. I played all the city sports. I've got the scars from the cars and the wrecks and the glass in the street and the scars on the asphalt playing basketball with no strings on the rim. I got those scars, brother. But I was very much an introvert and very much into Dad's message of reading and study. And my little brothers, I have younger brothers, 8 years junior, that followed me in this journey of being an introvert that becomes a functional extrovert. I think we all become functional extroverts. I think we all probably at some point in our lives had to be a quasi nerd, if not a nerd. I'll never forget when I was my classmate who finished with me in high school was Oprah Winfrey in the class of East Nashville High, 71. Oh, wow. And I was on her show maybe 20 years ago. She had me on the show with some of the other class superlatives. And she said, when she came on air, Andre, you've done all these great things, but you were such a nerd. What happened? I said, well, like all of us, Oprah Gail, we grow up. And here's my wife out here to testify I'm not a nerd anymore. And here's all these other articles that show that I'm a man of fashion and style. So that was probably, to be honest with you, that was a very useful thing to be very kind of closed and reading and committed to, coming in the house at 5 o'clock, no matter what I was doing out in the street, winning the ball games. And my little brother saw that, and Dad just kind of supported that habit of study and inquiry, and that got me rolling from East Nashville High to Vandy Engineering, and then to Harvard Med School. Yeah.
So what was your superlative?
Oh, Oprah said that means you were the nerd. You were voted the most dignified boy. I said, dignified? That sounds pretty good. No, that means you're a
nerd. I'm with you. I think that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, right? I tell her, one time years ago, I had a chance to talk when I met with her. I said, I was 3 out of 310 in the academic, in the class. I mean, I was just below the salutatorian, and you were number 10. And she says, yeah, but what's your bank account now? So,
yeah, not too many people are going to beat her there. So, so you go to Vanderbilt, and this is going to be interesting here. Yeah. You go to Vanderbilt, you go for engineering. So, a couple things. First of all, I'm curious to know why engineering, and then I want to hear about the racial isolation, the quote unquote invisible man that you talk about. Yeah, no
question about it. Vanderbilt at this time is really kind of a up and coming national university. But like many of the Southern privates at that time, they were considered the Southern Ivies, very sequestered, very kind of closeted, mostly were proving grounds or finishing schools for the rich white elite from the prep schools of the South. And when the doors cracked open because of integration, they began letting folks in. And I think it was 4 people in my whole class in the engineering school of maybe 450 in that entering class. It's not so very few of us. And I went there because I love the intersection of science and math. And it turns out the emerging field of biomedical engineering was just coming on board. And Vanderbilt had a major in that, where you could learn about how to apply engineering and math principles to solving health problems, whether it be through artificial kidneys, artificial hearts, or simulating physiologic functions with mathematical equations. I really like that stuff. But I also was akin to wanting to connect with people. So I didn't go totally the PhD route. I did go through the medical school route. But walking that campus at the time, it was literally, if I didn't have my father and that nurturing cave, I called it, back on 77 North 9th Street in East Nashville to go to from the bus transfers back home, I think the Lord probably gave me a break. If I had lived on campus, I may have had the same fate as a number of my other brothers who felt so isolated there that they left Vanderbilt and they started all over. But I would come home every night to the nurturing cave, and I would get the messages from my parents, particularly Dad, who would not let you fail. He would say, yeah, you made a C on the, but you've made A's before, Andre. You're going to make an A the next time. He would not let you fail. And he did that for all of us in the most sweet, loving, forceful, but impactful way, so that you finally believed what he was telling you. And in fact, you quit failing and you start making nothing but A's at Vanderbilt, and you finish magna cum laude. And he said, I knew this was going to be the case. And you win the program award for the whole biomedical engineering department graduating class because of your research was above and beyond what everybody else could do. And then you land at Harvard Med School. And he continues that message. He even visits me at Harvard Med School in my first year, and I'm living in this dorm called Vanderbilt Hall, this non-air conditioned dorm built by the Vanderbilt family, oddly enough, in the 1920s. And he visits me just to check on me and bring this big care package for mama with all her fried chicken in there and the saran wraps and stuff. And while I'm in class, he refuses to sleep there's only one bed. There's only a floor with a mat. He sleeps on the floor. He says, you got to go to class tomorrow. And so this is the kind of man that trained me, that once again, that model life. So a statement like that, what impact does a statement like that have on a very susceptible young man that's trying to learn how to be a father, how to be a mentor for older kids? No, you need to get your rest because you have to be sharp in class. I'll sleep on the floor. How about that one?
That's powerful. That's very powerful. You can see in the pictures behind me, my
I noticed
kiddo,
that.
so
I noticed that.
I'm taking it all in. Something I took in. You said use a combination of words. He talks to you in a sweet but forceful way. So how do you keep the force of a father but be sweet and loving at the same time?
Absolutely. I think the key is there are some important lessons you got to impart. Some of them are hard, some of them are difficult, and some require to be repeated and repeated. But boy, if the portal, if the mouthpiece, if the person from which these lessons are emanating can do it, all covered in love, all covered in sweetness and forgiveness, and boy, it's going to be delivered. It's going to be received, and we need more of that type of parenting and mentoring in all of our communities. In our communities. They were unique. I see this as more alchemy than chemistry, to be honest with you, Dale. I think the magic of the Churchwell parents, it's hard to absolutely repeat or re-experiment with something like that. But boy, you can have some great effects if you take some of these parts of these lessons and you make them part of your own upbringing of your own kids or the kids that you mentor, and that availability and the sense of humility that comes out of all this. Yeah.
I love it. So tell me, why did you choose Harvard Medical School? You're mentioning HBCUs with your parents. I noticed you chose Vanderbilt.
My father Fisk, mom TSU, my brother TSU, and my sister TSU. I think it was my feeling was I'd been in Nashville all my life, and I wanted to get out of Nashville, and I was looking at a potential thought process, a career in physician scientist research and biomedical engineering tied to medicine. I did some research, and I knew Harvard had the HST program, which is the Health Sciences Technology program. They do at MIT. I didn't want to necessarily have to go that route because at the time you had to get a PhD, but you could go to med school and still sit in on those classes and make use of the research teachers that were created in that Harvard HST program. And that's what I did. I spent 6 months of my senior year with Tom McMahon, who was the head of applied physics at Harvard, which was really a special 6 months of training and education from another extraordinarily gifted person that shared with me a lot of lessons that I've tried to pass along.
Excellent. What would you say, what was the most difficult part of being at Harvard? Any challenges that you particularly remember?
Yeah, I think the thing that I thought very much that came a little bit startling, because, at some level you think Boston, the cradle of freedom and liberty, the home of the Kennedys, man, this is going to be a liberal, wide open place where everybody has a great opportunity. I landed there in 1975, and that was the beginning of the busing in South Boston. And I've never seen so many fights, racial outbursts, even more so than I saw in Nashville, to be honest with you. And it became clear to me that no part of the country or no person or no group owns racism or prejudice or misogyny or anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, that's part of the human DNA that we need to continue to try to extract with our own teachings of CRISPR technology, extract those terrible elements that are part of man's humanity against man. Oscar Wilde said, man seeks to have psychological ascendancy over another man, and that's the nature of the human experience, whether it be a white guy trying to be better than another one. I learned about elitism there. So racism was present, but if you were from the elite Mayflower family or some Brahmin family that was rich or a New York patrician family, those folks looked down on not just Black folks, they looked down on white folks that didn't have that background. So there was this other element of elitism that I had to understand. But it also allowed me to forge new relationships and that were transcultural, trans-ethnic. I got to know and get to appreciate the strength of friendships from multiple ethnic and racial groups. As I tell kids now in my teachings around EDI or diversity inclusion, I say, look at the 5-handed rule. If all of the closest people in your life, excluding family, are from the same racial, ethnic, or gender group, you've got work to do, because to be part of the human experience so that you can make certain that you let everybody have the best opportunity that they can have with you, you're going to have to be sensitive to and understand people who are different from you. And the only way to do that is to have intimate relationships. So you need to have more than 0 on this hand. You need to have 2 or 3 people that are from different racial, ethnic, geographic groups. And so I got that happened. That happened there in Boston, and it really was an eye-opening. It began my kind of thoughts around the importance of diversity and inclusion as a tool for racial and social justice. We had some great leaders in our med school class who were ahead of us. The older med students like Woody Myers, who ran for governor this past year in Indianapolis and got beat, but Woody was 3 or 4 years ahead of me, and he was head of Ford Motor Company International, but came back to his home in Indianapolis to run for governor. And Woody was this great mentor for us, sharing the importance of us reaching back, supporting our younger colleagues and our high school colleagues and our college colleagues who are in HBCUs or others. And so there are a lot of great lessons learned outside of medicine there.
Wow. So did any of the racial elements spew into medicine for you?
Yeah, it did. No question. A couple of things. We saw at the time this whole thing of Shockley and formal eugenics. Black folks just aren't smart enough to go to med school was coming out. And Bernie Davis wrote an article in the New England Journal, who was the chair of microbiology at the Harvard Med School, and said that Black folks are taking spots at Harvard Med School class they shouldn't have. And we went to the dean of Harvard Med School and said this was incorrect. You're going to have to stand up. And a lot of our white faculty, great Jewish faculty, other faculty members stood with us outside the buildings, the main buildings on the Harvard campus, with protest signs to say he is wrong, and we believe and support the power and value of a diverse class. And the whole idea of skull eugenics sizing and all that stuff is incorrect, improper, and has no basis in science, whether it be here at Harvard or any school.
Yeah. Nice. Was Alvin Passant there back then?
He was there. Pooh was standing. He's still there. Pooh is standing out front with us in the signs. He was there.
Wow.
Yeah, Alvin Passant. Boy, you talk about a longevity and a long career of social justice there, my friend.
Yeah. So you leave Harvard, you come back down south to Emory. So why Emory? What was it about?
I applied to places that were cardiology, where the programs were led by leading cardiologists. I didn't apply to any place where if the chair of medicine or the dean was an ID guy, I didn't apply there.
That's interesting.
I knew from my research that the programs that had chairmen who were cardiologists typically tipped the scales towards resources towards cardiology. It's just the nature of it. Still the same now if you look at how departments of medicine are arranged. A little bit less so though. But you had these great people like Sonnenblick at Albert Einstein. You had Braunwald at the Brigham. You had Willis Hurst at Emory. You had Joe Greenfield at Duke. So there were places that had these iconic folks who could pick up a phone and change your whole life because they knew everybody. And when I met Dr. Hurst and the team that did the recruiting there, boy, it felt pretty good. And I was fortunate to match there. And he left us a few years ago, but no one again existed and led such a model life that led you into the way he thought, led you into those kind of key things about teaching you about how to give a piece of yourself to every patient, how it is important that every patient should be a friend of yours, how you and that should then steel you and commit you to learn more, to deliver more. He said, you're all about knowing about how to know and how to care, Andre, as a young physician. You have to do that equally. If you know a lot, but you don't translate that into great care, that is intellectually bankrupt. If you care a lot, but you don't keep up with your literature and your knowledge, then that's morally bankrupt. And so the challenge, he says, is to even balance, to know and care at high, proportionate, and equal amounts. How about that as a lesson?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's definitely amazing. So I'm really curious to know this. So you're down in Emory, and you got Morehouse there. Even today, you hear a lot of stories about the racial tension and you know how different residents are treated depending on what programs they come from.
This is a cool story, because when I became chief resident in 1984-85, that was the first year Morehouse students came to Grady to do their third-year clerkships. And I was the person that stood at the door to welcome them in and to serve as the lead mentor for those students. And there was Wayne Riley was in that group, and
I just interviewed him last week.
Yeah, Wayne and Charlene were, Charlene was a year ahead of Wayne, so I saw Charlene first. And so that was a really exciting year for me. So to be a chief resident, to take morning report and all the admissions, I think I took 1 week off that entire year to be there all hours of the night, to work with the young African-American residents who were students that were coming from Morehouse that blended in with our African-American Emory students and residents, and for them to see my overt and clear commitment to them. As a matter of fact, I was given an honorary student award by the Morehouse students, honorary class member. I walked with them during their graduation. That first class that came through, I walked with them during their graduation. So that's a very special thing. I think, medicine has politics in it, and those things have to be sorted out. I think the thing that's been really useful here at Vanderbilt was when we formed the Meharry-Vanderbilt Alliance 17 years ago, the people that formed that, the leaders on both sides of the street, acknowledged the value that each of what they brought. What Meharry brought, the Vanderbilt leaders understood. What Vanderbilt brought, Meharry leaders understood they didn't have. So you have the vision and moral justice of a primary-based African-American med school, HBCU med school, and a research level 1 university that's trying to push the envelope on molecular biology techniques and stuff to solve science. So now you bring those together under a conjoint program that's called the Alliance for now 18 years to look at the health disparities in Nashville, Tennessee. And it just turns out, praise the Lord, the leadership got along, and they built the program in a way that both schools have benefited, to the extent that the CTSA award that Vanderbilt and the Meharry-Vanderbilt Alliance wins is considered the model. They sit on the board for new CTSAs that the NIH is reviewing.
Oh, wow.
Because you'd want to have some African-American or minority serving institution involved at the table with a research level university. And there are over a couple of hundred health disparities research projects or translation projects around Nashville within a 2-hour radius that are funded by the Meharry-Vanderbilt Alliance's CTSA from the NIH.
So I know I don't want to keep you too long, but there are a few things that I'm really, really interested about. Before I get to those few things, which we'll deal with your brother somewhat, I'm curious to know, why was it cardiology though? What was it about cardiology?
Can you pause for a hot second?
We'll be right back.
I want them bad like a daddy, yeah. Only do it like Flagger, yeah. I'm kicking flavor, no saga, yeah. Hey, I like them blues. I might go Janet like Jackson. I got them options, yeah. It's all about progression. Life is like a blessing. Everything a win, loss is like a lesson. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, ain't no time for stressing.
All right, so something we haven't gotten to, which is really cool, is, like you mentioned, there's 3 of you, 3 brothers, all, Black men, of course, doctors. Not just that, but y'all have all done very well. And I understand the influence of your dad, but what was the secret sauce beyond that?
Yeah, I think I've chatted about it a little bit, but the key is the dad made the case that no matter what career path you take or what degree you're going for, it has to be informed by the humanities. He was an art and history. He was an art English major, double major. So his point is that no matter what your primary lens is, Andre, whether it be a physician or a business person, it has to be viewed through the arts and humanities, because they will soften the lens, but more importantly, they'll bring you a broader expanse of the human experience. They'll bring you the human experience through sculpture, through art through the ages, through music through the ages, whether it be jazz and its initial components up to monk. He said these areas will offer your creative brain, the right brain, opportunities to inform your left brain, your more deterministic daytime thinking brain. It will create opportunities for creativity and innovation and broader ways to look at problems that your colleagues won't have, but you have to really work it. And that's the message he gave me, and I passed it on to my younger brothers who actually picked it up, and Dad will continue the inculcation. What I think the secret sauce that may have helped us was that, well, I don't know, this is probably genetic. I'm a lefty. And so I draw, I sketch, I write. So my clothing is a Alexander Calder mobile. So I view a man's dress or men's dress or women's dress as a form of art, moving art. And so I do a lot of sketching and artwork. If you look behind me, there's a sketch of John F. Kennedy. That's mine.
Oh, wow, nice.
And there are sketches on the wall there. There's my wife. And there are sketches of my father at various ages hanging on the wall. And I carry with me, as my brothers do, kind of a notebook. They can draw and sketch too. And that stuff, as I draw and sketch and I write down problems I'm facing in the day, there is some type of synapses, and this science has pointed it out, that the creativity helps generate synapses to help you think about more common problems that gives you additional insight. So I would say that I think if I were to, and I do, inculcate messages of instruction that can make you better, make you think in more innovative, more expansive ways, deal with humanities. Look to yourself in terms of what are those things that you have passion for outside of medicine, whether it be art or music. My brother's Keith, who's at Yale, is the president of Yale. He was a cardiologist like me. He went to Harvard College, WashU Med School, and trained at Emory in cardiology. And he went off. He was here with me for a while, but he's off, president of Yale New Haven Hospital. He loves opera and symphonic music. I think he's the president of the Yale New Haven Symphony. And he's had a chance to conduct Stars and Stripes Forever on stage with the symphony. Kevin does artworks, beautiful sketches of mom and dad over the ages in his home. And so I would say that something that we don't, I think we're slowly understanding it. The book by Walter Isaacson on Leonardo da Vinci a few years ago was a bestseller, really helped renew the interests and thoughts around how right and left brain are truly connected to the corpus callosum for a real reason. And the reason is they inform each other's activities.
Nice. Now, fun question to wrap it up. Two fun questions. Since you're such a fashionable gentleman, it's a funny question, but just for fun, if you could be one piece of attire, one piece of clothing, what would that piece be and why?
Wow. Probably the tie, because the tie offers the cherry on top of the outfit if done properly. It harmonizes the whole assemblage. So like today, you see me with a tweed deep burgundy window pane suit with kind of a brownish orange window pane. I think that's a Dorme fabric. I have a contrasting blue snap collar, but the tie picks up and accents the colors in the suit. Okay. And so the tie to me is a uniforming thing. I think as people wear ties less, I would say the socks could be the uniforming element. Okay. So with the socks, they're orange. And they pick up the tie and pick up the orange or dark brown window pane in the jacket. The key on all of this is that it needs to have what the Italians call spezzorato, that kind of spontaneous element that it just kind of happened. if it looks like you spent all morning trying to get the points of the collar of your pocket square absolutely perfect, you've screwed up. It needs to be a bit uneven. It needs to look like you just kind of plopped it in there. Okay. And so it's those aspects of, and that's the creativity part, right? That's the creativity part.
Amazing. I really appreciate it. So, man, I'm gonna have to get you back some other time to dig in. We've got so much information. So I'm gonna give you the last word, of course, but I would love for you to end it with, my name is Dr. André Churchwell, and I'm a Black man in a white coat.
Absolutely. So I'm a native African-American born in Nashville, Tennessee during the Civil Rights Movement in Meharry Hubbard Hospital. I would not be here if W. Perry Crump, the chair of pediatrics at Meharry Hubbard Hospital, had not been the most phenomenal pediatrician in this city, because I inhaled Energene, swallowed Energene as a small child thinking it was a Pop's drink, and it aspirated into my lungs. Dale, you're an ENT doc. That's actually ethylene glycol. And I got lipoid pneumonia. He hydrated the heck out of me. I was probably 4 years old, emptied my stomach out, put me in an oxygen tent, and hydrated my kidneys, flushed them with some 100% alcohol solution IV, because as you know, ethylene glycol competes for the alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme. And if it's converted in the liver, it's converted to acid, which is toxic. And so you get a high anion gap metabolic acidosis and die. E. Perry Crump stayed in the hospital for 5 days and saved my life, and I would not be here. So I'm a Black man in a white coat. Praise God. Legendary chairman of pediatrics at Meharry Medical School, Dr. E. Perry Crump, was a white man in a black coat.
Amen.
Ooh. I want them band like a daddy, yeah. Oh, let do it like Flogger, yeah. I'm kicking flavor, no saga, yeah. Hey, I like them blues. I might go Janet like Jackson. I got them options, yeah. It's all about progression. Life is like a blessing. Everything a win, loss is like a lesson. Ooh, ooh.